Welcome back to the Play by Play Podcast YouTube channel, where we are continuing our reporting on NBA free agency with looking at the all time winners of NBA free agency in this year's 2025 cycle. But before we look at all of those, I want to please remind you guys to go down below, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share with your friends, and like the video, as well as always turn on post notifications. And as always, I want to also encourage you to go ahead and following us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my reaction to latest breaking news within the NBA and NFL, and you will never miss for whenever the podcast uploads an episode. And without further ado, guys, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead. Let's hop into this right here. So this is an article made by NBA.com. Really like how they made this a nice, detailed version of all 30 teams and their free agency deals, extensions, and trades that they made, and of course departures as well. Now we're not going to be going over all 30 teams, of course, and today I'm just going to be going over who I felt had the best cycle of free agency this time around. And of course, there's going to be an episode in a couple of days looking at the losers as well. So not all 30 teams will be covered in this, but just want to go through the highlights of who I think did the best job and who really improved this offseason. So let's start at the top of this here. And we actually start off with the winner right off the bat with the Atlanta Hawks. Really like the move that the Hawks made this year. I think that they made a really nice adjustment into their approach, right? The previous years, they tried a lot to feed in a lot with Trae Young, right? Feed into his scoring, feed in his ability to run the offense, and just get, superior role players around him, guys like Clint Capella and whatnot, who aren't going to get very much in his way. But this year, they've moved away from that a lot. They had a lot of departures, as you can see, one of those including Clint Capella. But they signed away guys that they signed guys that not only, I believe, patch up Trae Young's weaknesses, but also move this team into a different perspective as far as, improvement in athleticism and whatnot, improve ability to play defense, the versatility that they have. Like guys like Luke Kennard, who can play, 2 or 3 positions on the floor. Kristaps Porzingis, 2 or 3 positions on the floor. Nickeil Alexander-Walker with his versatility, being able to guard, positions 1 through 3 and whatnot. And they also got a lot more offensive firepower within their lineup as well. I mean, you're going to have now Trae Young, Luke Kennard. You're going to have Zachary Sachet still. So that's your 3 across the board right there. Some solid shooting with that. They were able to retain Jalen Johnson. Kristaps Porzingis, obviously, as we know, has the ability to spread the floor. And then you have guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming off the bench and whatnot. And they get off, the hefty contract in Clint Capella. They were able to trade for Porzingis in a deal that, they didn't necessarily really have to give up that much within that deal, right? Pretty much Georges Niang, in a swap for Kristaps Porzingis. I say that that's a pretty good deal on their side. And I think that they are really turning the corner and are going to be in a Eastern Conference contending position this year with all of the moves that they have made, especially with the Eastern Conference being a lot weaker. So now, of course, all this is going to depend on, as always, the health of some of these guys. Jalen Johnson had some injury issues this previous season. You have Kristaps Porzingis, who we know has a history and whatnot. But if those guys together can stay healthy, you're going to have, a really solid combination of guys in there. They, of course, also have Austin Newell coming off the bench, who they just drafted out of Georgia. So you're going to have some power forward flexibility on the block. You're going to have great rim running, which I think is something that they were missing with Clint Capella. Porzingis and Austin Newell can definitely do that amazing. And then, of course, these players like Austin Newell who can't shoot well, you have those to cover up. So I think Atlanta overall, they fed a lot more into the size and defensive types of things. They gave themselves more depth, which will be, a theme that we go over all throughout, the next season, because that is really what is allowing teams to win these days. It's just pure depth. Having 7, 8, 9, 10-man rosters, those are the teams that are going out and contending. I think that Atlanta put themselves in a really, really solid position to go out and do that this year. Then you move, not too far along to the Boston Celtics, who, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit hesitant on what label to put them as, if they're a winner or a loser, because you might look at this and say, wow, they lost a ton of pieces, and a ton of pieces that were not so long ago a part of that 2 years ago championship roster. Drew Holiday, Luke Kornet, Kristaps Porzingis, all 3 were integral parts of that group. But I mean, when you look into things, Luke Kornet was going to be pretty expensive. I did not expect him to be getting 4 years, $41 million from the San Antonio Spurs. Drew Holiday, as of right now, is 35 years old, and Kristaps Porzingis has an injury history. And I think when you look at the fact that, Jason Tatum is not going to be available in this following season for them, they really need to feed in more to their offensive capabilities, but they also just need to get a lot younger. And I think that they actually made some really solid moves. The Anthony Simon moves was one of the most, surprising trades that I had this year, just because of the trade-off that they got. I mean, pretty much Simons for Drew Holiday straight up. Really, really no really add on to that trade. So you trade away a 35-year-old aging veteran who sure was a good 3-and-D presence, but then you get the top scorer on the Trailblazers team in Anthony Simons, who we can just look at right now. If we go to the Boston Celtics roster and what they got, Simons last year is plugged in right into that shooting guard position, averaged 19.3 points per game off of 42% from the field, 5 assists as well. So he has some playmaking ability within there as well. Going to plug in perfectly to that shooting guard position. Derek White's still going to be solid on the defensive end. And, the depth is definitely low. Really, the only guy that I like coming off the bench is really Payton Pritchard. And even the starting lineup is pretty light with Georges Niang and Luke Garza starting at your starting center position. But when Tatum comes back into that lineup, and if they could get valuable minutes outside of Payton Pritchard and Hugo Gonzalez off the bench, and Sam Hauser is definitely playable as well. Let's not forget about that. And ultimately, I think that this is also really going to test the limits of Joe Mazzulla as a head coach. Is he going to be able to actually develop these guys and be able to play in, lower level role players and be able to feed them into a championship contending roster? So are they going to take a little bit of a dip? I definitely think they will. But I think ultimately in a year or two, when Jason Tatum is plugged into this, I think that a lot of the moves that they made are going to end up being beneficial. I think the only really, hesitant that I have on this is because this is a team that won the title 2 years ago, and they virtually just traded, half of that roster, and are pretty much in a rebuilding state as of right now. But once they get that next star back, I think that they'll be back into it. And I like the Simons for Drew Holiday trade that they made right there. Then we scroll down a little bit below, next to the Charlotte Hornets, who I also as a big time winner right now, just simply because I think that they help their depth a lot, and I really do believe that this team is really beginning to form into one of the most underrated younger cores in the league as of right now. I mean, if we take a look at this depth chart that we have right now for them, LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Concanopel, Ryan Kalkbrenner, DeJon Salon they still have. He's not on this list. I think he's towards the end a little bit. They still have Liam McNeely, who they drafted this year, obviously. And now you go out and you add in some veteran type scoring. And a lot of people have been hesitant just because they have been going after so many guards, right? They got Colin Sexton in a trade for Jusuf Nurkic. They went ahead, they signed away Spencer Dinwiddie, they re-signed Trey Mann and whatnot. So a lot of people are questioning, why are you going so much into depth into this backcourt? But I think that's all obviously going to be beneficial because LaMelo Ball has had such a deep injury history, and they really do need insurance in that case. And I think in the case of all three of these guys, they all play different roles. Colin Sexton right now listed as a point guard, but as we've all know, he's kind of evolved a lot more into a scoring guard. Scored 18.4 points per game in last year's regular season. We go ahead and look at his statistics: 20.8 points per game. For the Cleveland Cavaliers back in 2019, follows that up with a 24 points per game season in 2020. And, solid split numbers for him here: 40% from three up here in his rookie season, 39%, 40% once again from the three-point line, nearly 50% from the field in 2022. So he's going to end up evolving into a really solid bench scorer for you. And then Spencer Dinwiddie, I definitely think that he has some scoring prowess as well, but I also think that he can help a lot within the playmaking side of things, which will be kind of nice, especially because, when LaMelo goes off, they do lack a little bit of playmaking, right? But I'd say the final thing that I really, really like about the moves that they've made as well is just having DeJon Salon definitively in that second group now. I think that that's going to be very beneficial with him to just, kind of have an open floor for himself and allowing himself to really just figure out what he is, right? We don't really know where he really fits, where his development is really at. He didn't have, a great rookie season, which we expected, right? He was very, very raw, 6 points per game, 33% from the field. Did have some solid rebounding numbers for pretty much a small forward. But overall, he needs to develop, right? And I think having him in that second group going against lower level players and whatnot, having more of an open court, that ultimately is going to be pretty beneficial for his development as well. And also, the additions of guys like Pat Connaughton, Mason Plumlee off the bench at the center position. They still have Grant Williams. So overall, again, we talked about depth so many times. You're not looking at a Hornets roster that has 9-10 guys in it. which ultimately is going to allow them to last longer throughout the course of the season and is going to allow them to patch up when injuries happen, which they've been a culprit of a lot of injuries throughout the past couple of seasons. Then you have the Cleveland Cavaliers right here, and this was a team that didn't make a ton of moves, right? Really, the big move was the trading of Isaac Okoro for Lonzo Ball, and I definitely thought that was a big-time move in their department. Obviously, they were not going to be able to keep Ty Jerome under contract. He just wanted way too much money, and they still definitely need to fill in at the point guard position. And I definitely think that Lonzo is suitable for that spot. Once again, 3-and-D guy, but also a guy that just has a really, really solid feel for the game. Dude that, moves very well within the court, can play within the pick and roll, is a solid playmaker, has improved his three-point shot, and seems to also be a guy that a lot of players just love playing with and love being around. It's just a positive force within the locker room and whatnot, which you definitely can't complain about. And, in terms of what Isaac Okoro was doing, really wasn't doing much from an offensive standpoint and really hasn't developed a lot from his rookie season. I've actually been pretty disappointed with what he's done. But especially with Darius Garland, suffering injury, especially in the playoffs, in that second round series that they had against the Indiana Pacers, they could have used, a big time standalone point guard, which Jerome was able to play that, but being able to have that for a cheaper price obviously comes around. And they still have, decent forward depth. Max Strus there could be a good three-point shooter. DeAndre Hunter is obviously the defensive guy to fill in right there. So the depth could be definitely worked in a little bit more. But, ultimately you just get a little bit cheaper. And you really didn't have to give up, a big-time impact player for somebody who I believe will be an impact player for them in Lonzo Ball. I'm not going to focus too much on either two of these teams, but I did want to mention them as winners, but I've just talked about them so much. The Dallas Mavs, they made one more addition. They replaced Spencer Dinwiddie with D'Angelo Russell. I think Russell, especially being in more of a bench role where he has a lot of the pressure off of him and he's taking less shots, he's definitely going to be a lot more efficient in the three-point department and will be solid coming off the bench or, in that starting position until Kyrie Irving is able to come back, which they actually signed him to a 3-year extension. So I'm hoping that means that, signs are good in terms of his recovery and he's able to come back, pretty much in one piece. And then the Denver Nuggets, we've talked about them for so long as of right now. They've just made so many big-time moves. It has been reported that they are likely still going to be keeping Jonas Valanciunas, that he will not be leaving to Europe. But even if things do break down, the Nuggets will get a mid-level exception from the deal that they made with the Sacramento Kings, and that will ultimately end up being potentially a number of guys. I've heard Al Horford, I've heard Bradley Beal and whatnot. So I think that Denver ultimately will be able to fill in that backup center position. And if not, they'll be able to get another talented wing player, and they'll be able to move guys down like DeRon Holmes and whatnot. But they improved defensively. They improved their depth a lot in positions where guys either got hurt. They improved their defense and really got, a big-time steal with Cam Johnson to be able to replace Michael Porter Jr. And then Tim Hardaway Jr., as a backup shooting guard, as a veteran piece, will likely be, the 10th, 11th guy on the roster. And there's also a guy that I like, just to be able to mold the younger guys on Denver's team that they still have. Guys like Julian Strawther, guys like Jalen Pickett, who haven't been in the league for that long. I definitely think that Hardaway Jr. could plug in and be an impactful teacher for those guys to go out and learn and definitely improve over time, even sitting on the bench. Then we go to the Detroit Pistons right here. Another big-time winner for me. Again, the Pistons, they kind of fed into what their weaknesses were, which was a lot of it, I believe, was scoring outside of Cade Cunningham. They definitely didn't have a lot of big pops outside of Cade Cunningham. If you go ahead and just take a look at the roster that they had, especially when Jaden Ivey went down, their offense ended up falling a little bit flat and ended up, weighing a lot on Cade Cunningham. As you can see, his averages for the year, 26.1. The dude had a giant leap. But, I mean, if you look at these other players like Asar Thompson, 10 points per game, you go ahead and look at Tobias Harris, 13.7 points per game. So he was really your second scorer coming off. You have, Jalen Duren, who did take another big-time step after having a big step back in the previous season, averaging a double-double. But now they went ahead and plugged in Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, who are three-point shooters. Big-time three-point shooters that are going to be able to knock down threes. Duncan Robinson, especially in the sign trade, they didn't have to really give up anything for him. Go ahead and take a look at his splits for 2024-2025. I mean, 43% from the three at home. You look at 40% overall across the field. Away from home, even 38%. Within the conference, within the division and whatnot. If you look at October, it does start off a little bit cold, but ends up improving along the season. Then Karis LeVert, is not only a valuable player when it comes to three-point shooting, but he could also play some defense as well. And he's been somebody who's been kind of hopping around, so you hope that he kind of finds his footing here with the Detroit Pistons. I think he does kind of fit into that, more physical play that the Pistons do offer. But you can see, 64% in October from three is amazing, 47% in December. Finishes off the year pre-All-Star break at 40.5% from three, averaging over, 45% from the field for majority of the season. So ultimately, it's a very similar situation to where the Timberwolves were in. You just get that pressure off of Cade Cunningham's shoulders, and you'll be able to allow him to, yes, score the ball, but make your offense a lot more unpredictable, get the eyes off of him and allow him to score more sneakier ways, and also be able to play make and get him to his guys. The only problem that I still have with Detroit is they don't really have a big-time backup big to back up Jalen Duren, so that's definitely something that they still need to plug in. But I think within, another season or two, they definitely still need a little bit more experience. Once they get that extra piece, they'll definitely be in full force. And definitely doesn't hurt that LeVert and Robinson have some solid, playoff experience as well. We move throughout this. We go to the Houston Rockets, who also had a big-time offseason. As you can see, we're able to retain majority of their roster. And then obviously the big addition was grabbing Kevin Durant. I'm not really sure what the addition of Clint Capella was about, especially signing him to a 3-year deal when you extended Steven Adams by 3 years. So now you have Sengun, Capella, and Steven Adams. Not really sure how that fit is going to be, but they're trying to, fill in with size and just be able to be a good, solid rebounding team, which was some areas that they were definitely struggling with, playing more of a small ball role. But keeping Jamari Smith on a big extension was definitely huge. Keeping Fred VanVleet to help your shooting is big. Obviously, the trade of Kevin Durant was, we talked about that before. And then Dorian Finney-Smith to a 4-year deal. Very versatile. Does need to get his shooting splits up a little bit better. Does need to become a better three-point shooter. But he's going to be able to be a really solid switch defender on, whatever position he guards, 1 through 4. And will fill in there. And definitely will be a lot more consistent than players like Jalen Green and even Cam Whitmore, which they ended up trading away. Talked about the Clippers a little bit. Lakers, I don't know how big of really winners they are, but the Memphis Grizzlies, in my opinion, did have a pretty good signing period this offseason. Obviously, their big trade away was trading away Desmond Bane, which did hurt. And, of course, losing Luke Kennard as well as a 3-and-D wing was a big-time hurt as well. But they got Ty Jerome, signed them away from the Cleveland Cavaliers to fill in as your backup point guard. Kendavis Caldwell-Pope has always been, one of those plug-in 3-and-Ds that you can kind of put ever. Cole Anthony, I'm not really sure of how much more he can really develop because we just haven't seen a big-time step from him and a full-time progression. Still has a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to the turnover game and just doesn't seem to process things as fast as he was, coming out of college and whatnot. But so he'll probably be in that third or fourth point guard role, as you can see here, 9.4 points per game, a 42% split, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. So he'll be able to contribute in any way that you want him to, but he's not going to be big time. Then, of course, the big time move is obviously drafting Cedric Howard, which I think was the perfect complement to giving away Desmond Bane within the offseason. Somebody who is just so physical, can, sometimes even play at the power forward position, average nearly double-digit rebounds in college at Washington State. Solid three-point shooter as well. I believe it was like 42% from the three-point line at Washington State. So, just an all-around, monster that can play in all different types of ways. They get younger, they get bigger, they get a lot more physical. Definitely like it here for the Memphis Grizzlies. Got the Miami Heat, not really. Of course, like I said, a lot of these teams will end up going through in the end the losers video. We move to the New York Knicks, who I have as a winner just based off of this pure move that they have here with Jordan Clarkson. Again, it was just a big-time weakness for them, plugging a guy coming off of the bench, needing a big-time scorer coming off of the bench, especially in that Eastern Conference series going up against the Indiana Pacers. They just didn't have that last spark plug that could really, get them across the edge, especially when they had big-time leads towards the end of the game. You didn't really have people to come off the bench and be able to really, keep the foot on the gas and be able to really extend their lead. Clarkson will definitely do that. He'll plug in right next to Miles McBride. So now you have, remnants of a 7-8 roster. And also Gershon Yabusele, who they got in a signing as well, I believe, is a really solid, plug-in box power forward that will be able to play, big on the block. Definitely is reminiscent. He's basically their Precious Achiuwa replacement, which will be solid. So, if you look at it across the board, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-man rotation. So again, Those are the rosters that are definitely being a lot more successful in recent years. So having a 9-man rotation to work in will definitely allow you to extend yourself throughout the course of the season. Oklahoma State Thunder, I mean, they basically just re-signed everyone that they had, so I guess that could be a win in my book. But the big one that I wanted to focus on was the Orlando Magic, because finally, I repeat, finally, the Orlando Magic have signed an actual playmaking point guard. They signed Tyus Jones to a 1-year deal. I am hoping that he is going to start for them next season. Let's go ahead and see what the ESPN depth chart has him worked around. They have him as the third point guard. I hope that that's not the case. I pray that Tyus Jones is playing, because that was exactly the guy that they needed on this team. I've said it for years, but Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, as much as I love them, they are not true point guards. Suggs definitely a lot better at scoring. Black, you definitely do see playmaking potential outside of him, but he's not good enough offensively to really use it, and he hasn't really been developing over the course of the years. Jace Richardson, who they just drafted, is an undersized scoring shooting guard. So Tyus Jones finally plugging in here. Even if he's able to come on with that second unit and be that playmaking point guard for the second unit, I would love that. But now you actually get a distributor to all these scorers that you have. Suggs, Bane, Wagner, Banchero, Wendell Carter can stretch the floor, Jace Richardson scoring, Jonathan Isaac scoring, and whatnot. You finally have a distributor to get it to these offensive guys. And then, of course, being able to trade for Desmond Bane. I understand that they gave up a bunch of draft capital for first-round picks for Bane, but trading away KCP and packaging that to be able to give you a semi-big three there between Bane, Wagner, and Banchero, I definitely don't think that he will get in the way of those other two guys. He'll be defensively sound and whatnot. Him and Suggs should be a pretty dominant defensive duo in that backcourt, and the three-point shooting is going to get even better. And then still, I still have a lot of solid young talent that's not even really playing right now, like Tristan Da Silva, like Jet Howard, and whatnot. Noah Penda, who they drafted in the second round, who could have some development. So ultimately, Moritz Wagner, who I'm not sure why he's all the way back in this lineup, but so ultimately, again, building depth here, and you finally get some playmaking to your scores, which I absolutely love. Philadelphia 76ers, I didn't know what happened there. Didn't really make too many big-time moves. Phoenix Suns, I'm still on the fence with that, so I'm not going to include them in this. Portland Trailblazers, Sacramento Kings. Spurs were definitely a big-time winner just due to some of the moves that they made within the draft and beforehand. And then I think that Luke Cornett is perfect to just being able to back up Wemby. He's proven to be valuable as a backup center, and especially with Wemby's blood clot issues, you don't know if that's going to be really a recurring thing. You'd love to see that plugging in right there with Luke Cornett. A little bit pricey for my liking, 4 years, $40 million, but I mean, he performed, so he was obviously going to get money from somewhere. Jazz, I'm not too ecstatic about, but the Washington Wizards at the end of the list definitely will close out this video. Definitely like a lot of the moves that the Wizards made, but my favorite one overall was definitely them trading for Cam Whitmore for only 2 second-round picks. And I'm also really hoping that Washington gives Cam Whitmore the opportunities that he needs, because this dude is just so dynamic. He is very crafty. He has a wicked first step to be able to get past you. He has a bunch of different finishes in his bag, driving to the rim. He can shoot the 3-ball. He's a very valuable asset, but he just wasn't able to represent himself well because the Houston Rockets just had so many talented young guards on their squad. You also get Kelly Olynyk to come off the bench to be able to stretch 5 behind Alex Sarr. And then, of course, trading away Jordan Poole for C.J. McCollum. I think ultimately will do you good. Just from a chemistry point of view, I think that McCollum will definitely be better to be able to fix up the locker room, fix up some of the shooting inconsistencies that you were having with Poole. And, I'm interested to see what this Washington team does, because, they're kind of, in the midst of both a rebuild and a contending team, because they have veterans now like Marcus Smart, C.J. McCollum, Chris Middleton. They have a lot of really smart veterans on their squad, Corey Kispert and whatnot. You now have Kelly Olynyk, but you still have some youth like Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, and whatnot. So, I'm really interested to see how they really play this. Of course, they also have Trey Johnson at the shooting guard position, but I'm interested to see how they play this, because I think that they're kind of trying to contend and trying to develop their young guys and speeding up that process, but also trying to get as much young talent as they possibly can. So interested to see how they work around there. But ultimately, you improve your chemistry and locker room assets with C.J. McCollum within the room. I think that Cam Whitmore is going to be a very, very valuable point guard to you. And ultimately, you just got more experience. And I think that you just improved shooting-wise overall, which is always one of the biggest things during the NBA. And that, to be quite honest, guys, is all that I have for you guys today. Little bit of a longer episode. We're at about 25 minutes right now, but let me know what you guys think. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who is your winners? Who's your losers? Look out for that losers episode coming in just a couple of days. And who are you most excited to see play this season? What was your real favorite move in this 2025 offseason cycle? And who right now do you think are the top dogs at the top of the league? So comment all of those down below, guys, as well as, of course, subscribe and leave it a like and sharing with your friends. And, of course, as always, following us on all social medias, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. On all of those, you will get to see my reactions to breaking news in the NBA and in the NFL. And you will also never get to miss for whenever the podcast uploads. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Have a good rest of your week. Take it easy, and peace.